Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second virtual meeting of the Pasadena Civil War Roundtable. I see that we have a lot of people from out of the area and that have heard about us. If you could help us out a little in the chat that is on the top bar of your screen, just to the left of the settings wheel, there's a little comment bubble. If you would comment if you're out of the area, where you're from, and how you heard about our meeting. That would help us greatly in knowing how well our publication, our publicity is carrying. So we hope that you'll do that. Secondly, since I'm the treasurer of the Civil War Roundtable, I'm going to put in a plug for the dues payments for the roundtable. We do have stagnant costs that we still have to have paid during this time of COVID. We still have newsletters. We still have website costs and so forth. So we asked if you are interested in supporting the Pasadena Civil War Roundtable. The dues are $25 for an individual, $30 for a couple that would get the newsletter mailed to the same address. And you can do that, you can pay that online at our website at PasadenaCWRT.org. And it's a tab that says join or become a member. So we hope that you will support us. If you're interested in supporting us a little bit more than a membership and want to make an extra donation, there is a patron tab on the website that will take you to that spot, and you'll see who our patrons are for this year. It is a voluntary donation, but it does help to keep things going, and the patron donations specifically help us with bringing in out-of-town speakers when we do have live meetings again, helping to pay their travel expenses. So we hope that you might consider that as well. I did see Nick come on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
Did you have any announcements?
No, although those of you who get the issues of the call were informed that we had a contact from one of our former members who moved back to Virginia, and that was kind of interesting. Once in a while, we hear from people who have been members in the past who have moved to other areas of the country. And in this case, Brad Forbush, who gave several talks for our roundtable, is now a volunteer with one of the battlefields back east. And he sent me some things that he was doing some interesting research back there, that I put in some things about what he was doing in the issue of the call that our members get.
And did I see Michael Onmino come on the call? David, do you see his name anywhere?
Let me just check again. I had not seen him a moment ago. I see a mic, but I don't think it's him. No, I don't see it. I don't see anybody that looks like it right now.
Okay. Nick, did you have any other announcements?
Actually, yes. Oh, somebody's echoing.
Yeah, we're getting some echo. Let me see if I can catch that 1 second. I'll take care of that right now. All right, how's that?
Oh,
Sure,
much better.
Anyway, for those of you who have been members for a while, normally our group is invited up to the Memorial Day services at Mountain View Cemetery that are run by the Union veterans and various other groups. Unfortunately, this year, because of the virus, there was no public event up there. But Mountain View Cemetery asked me to work with them on a video project, and we've just started work on it, to tell the stories of some of the Civil War veterans and related people who are buried up there at the cemetery. So that should be going live on the Mountain View Cemetery website later, well, over the next few weeks. All that's up right now is an introduction saying that this series is coming. But the idea is that this is a way of remembering the stories of the Civil War veterans who are buried locally, and telling the public about the ones that they may never have heard of. So that's, I've recorded about 10 segments so far. They're just little short segments that are going to be going up on their website.
That's great news, Nick. It's a nice alternative to missing out entirely on that special ceremony.
Yeah.
Anything else, Nick?
That's all that I had.
Okay, then we will go forward with introducing our speaker, who is going to mute all of you so that you cannot speak or we can't hear your background information during his presentation. But if you want to ask questions of the presenter, use that little chat bubble at the top of your screen next to the settings wheel, and our speaker will be able to see those comments and answer those questions at the end of the presentation. So our speaker this month is David Richardson, who is going to be presenting on the Civil War in color. David has been restoring and colorizing Civil War images for over 12 years. During that time, his work has appeared on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, book covers for Random House, Penguin Books, and his images are part of the exhibits at the American Civil War Museum in Richmond, in the collection of the Gettysburg Heritage Center, in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, which is LACMA, and others. Each month his images are seen in Civil War news, and he has been a featured speaker for the Center for Civil War Photography, as well as the Surratt House. Colorizing images is something that has taken place since the very beginning of Civil War photography. This month, David will share not only his colorizations, but also original hand colorized images from the Civil War. So without further ado, David, take it away.
Thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. And I was looking in there, and it looks like we do have a winner. It looks like that Chris from Australia is our winner for the farthest to be able to join us. So I want to welcome everybody. I don't think that it's possible to get too much further than Australia, so welcome there. I want to say thank you also for the opportunity to be able to make this presentation. I've given this presentation a couple of times in the past. I did go through and I updated it for what we're doing here tonight, and I brought in some new images and things. So hopefully it will be of interest to you guys. So I want to talk a little bit about what it is that I'm going to share with you. So the images that we have on here, these are all ones that are actually all period images. So every image that you're going to see is one that was taken during the Civil War. I've actually gone through and then I've restored those, and then I've colorized those images to be able to allow them to be able to be seen in color. So there's no reenactors, there's no recreations, there's no modern images. All of these are historical period images, and then I've just restored them and then colorized them. Along with that, I've also taken and put in things in there from colorizations that were done during the period, so that we can see that contrast between what it is that they would have during that time period and what it is that we have now. So we're going to be taking a look at some of that as well. Basically, when you're looking at an image, this is what we typically remember. I mean, this is what I remember from when I was in school, that, you know, the images from the Civil War, and that was a kind of a grainy black and white photo, and it was like, okay, that's the image that we would see. What we didn't know, and what I didn't realize though, was that people actually were interested in seeing what it looked like in color at the time. So you could actually pay to be able to have somebody hand color an image. And so here is an example of one that was done during the time period. So this was one done during the Civil War, and that somebody would go in there and then colorize these images. Something that's kind of interesting here, if you look at this, these soldiers here, this is Confederates. If you notice, it says Confederates, Confederate dead in here, but you'll notice that it appears that they're wearing Union blue in the uniforms. And the reason that is because that if you were, I mean, if you think about it, if you're looking at a black and white image and that you've colorized it and you just put Confederate gray onto a soldier, you're not going to see much. So they would often go and they would hand color the Confederates to be in a uniform that looked more like a Union uniform. So you did see a lot of that type of thing in here. So that's what we're looking at right now for that. But I wanted to be able to see what this would look like if we were able to bring it in to be able to put the technology and things that we have today. So here is the same image, and now we're seeing it with the full color that we're able to bring to it today with the type of technology that we had. So this is exactly the same image, but this is actually used from the negative from the Library of Congress, and it allows us to be able to see it obviously in a much clearer fashion. Hand coloring was something that was done a lot. They were done personally, so you could actually go and pay a little bit extra to be able to have one done, and you could do it privately to be able to have one for yourself. So this is one that a soldier had, may have been sent back to their family. Here's a Confederate. Notice this one, there's not a lot of color. They added a little bit to the cheeks, a little bit to some of the brass elements, and that's about it. Not a lot of color. Other ones had more color. So here is the Zouave uniform, and you see that they put the red for the Zouave and the cap in there, and then some of the brass buttons and the buckle in there for that. So it would depend on what it is that the photographer, the artist had available and what they could do to be able to enhance those. Some of them would actually do the same from their family, and they would take pictures of their family. So here is a wife or sweetheart that would have an image colorized and then sent to him. Some of them actually did them themselves, and they would actually paint directly onto the tint type or onto the glass negative on there, and then have that sent to the soldier. Here's one of a child with a nice flag in there for that. Another one of maybe a couple of children in there for this, when you see some different elements in there that are colorized. Some of it, they don't put much color in. So the skin tones, they didn't do much with that, but they did add it into some other areas. Some of them, they added in quite a bit in here. And you'll see some things that quite stand out, in my opinion, in there. So the New York Infantry one in here. Why would you choose these particular colors if it wasn't something that you were familiar with, and if it wasn't something that you knew was correct in there for that? So I thought those are fairly unique for that. Here's one of the ones that I really like, and they did a really, really nice job. You see the differences between the colors for some of the ones that they added in there. Some of them in here are really, really well done. And you see some of the private ones like this, they're really, really nicely done, very well executed in there, and very much in the detail for what they're putting in here. Here's another one that I really like, just a nice color in there for the pants and for the sash in there, and for just some of the other elements. And then you see other parts of it, like some of the backgrounds that they didn't add much color, but they did add them into some areas. This is actually one of my favorites of the private ones in there, using this to be able to see some of the green of the uniforms, to be able to show some of the things for some of the ones that were a little bit different or a little bit unique in there, and they would do those, and you could actually see that and kind of get an idea. This is something different, or this is something individual or special in there for that. So colorizing it was something, as I had mentioned, was something that was done for people on a private basis, but actually commercial companies would do it as well. So this is one that was done by E.T. Anthony, and this is a stereo card that was done during the Civil War, and they would actually have somebody go in and colorize these. So you could buy a set of stereo cards for like a dollar in there, and then for $1.25 you get a half a dozen of them, and somebody would have gone in and colorized them. So for slightly more, you could actually get the color version in there. Most people did not choose to be able to do the color versions, so they're very rare today to be able to do them. And when you looked at them, that you did see things in there where that you could see the differences between somebody that was doing it for an extra 25 cents, and they're mass producing these things versus the private ones like we were looking at a moment ago, where there's a lot more quality and detail, in my opinion. So here's another one. This is one that they did of the New York Zouaves in there, and you can see some minor colors, a little bit with the grass in there. They added a little bit of color in there, and they added a little bit in the background for that, not a whole lot. Here's one of the ones that I did. So wherever I could, I took those images and I found those. And if I have done one of those, then I'm going to show those for what I have, and then we'll look at the hand-colored version of the same image, just to be able to do a comparison in between there. I'm not trying to say that my ability to be able to do that was better. Certainly I had better tools, better techniques available to them than they did during the period. I am really grateful for them to be able to do those kind of things, because they were actually painting right on either the tint type or right on the print itself. I certainly have the advantage with Photoshop to be able to go in and just delete a layer, or just do an undo if I don't like the results in there, to be able to do that. So let's actually take a look at the hand-colored version of the same image. Now, obviously, this one has worn over time, and you can see that it's lost quite a bit of definition in there. Certainly, some of that is age. Certainly, some of that is the method that they were using. Again, they're using watercolor to be able to do that, to be able to apply those for that. Here's one that's interesting. There's a lot of images that you'll see within this set that are actually more, and there's a lot of them within the areas within the Civil War images as well, that were more of a travel type of photo. There isn't anything looking at this particular image that you would say, oh, this is a Civil War image. It was an area where the Peninsular Campaign was going on in 1862 with McClellan in there, but you wouldn't know it if you did not see that caption on there. You would not realize that this is a Civil War image, but they did actually have quite a few of them that were like this. Here's another one that was similar to that. This one is actually a bridge built by the 15th New York in there, and they built this to be able to cross over because that they were cut off because of a storm in there, and they got cut off on one side of the water, and they needed to be able to access to be able to get away. So they built this bridge to be able to get across. Here is that same one though, as it was done in one of the color ones of the period. So again, wherever I could, I tried to be able to fit those in just so we could see that comparison. I like this one here. This one is an image here of Fort Richardson in Arlington in here. I've done a couple of other ones. I don't have any in this set that I've done of this particular image. The original from the Library of Congress for this, the negative unfortunately is quite bad. And so it doesn't lend itself terribly well to be able to do this. You also see in here, if you're looking at this, the cannon here is brass, the cannon here is brass. In reality, these should be just black in there for those. So they actually would take liberties for those just to be able to do something that would be a little more of interest in there. And so you would often see people doing things like that. Here is Federal Battery in Fair Oaks. I tried to do these more or less in chronological order. Here is the same image that was done. It's interesting that most of these were done during the Civil War. This one, however, the colorization for this one, if I recall, that actually had a copyright date of like 1902 or 1903. So this one was done a bit after the war in there, but you're seeing the hand-colored version that they did from that. Here is a rather well-known image. This is a hospital at Savage Station in Virginia. This is the colorization version that I did of it. Then a hand-colored one. I actually really like the hand-colored one in here for this. You notice that they did take dramatic license, in my opinion, to be able to put in a number of areas for blood spots and that type of thing in here. When I looked at the image, and I'll go back to my version here for a moment. When I looked at the image, because I was able to look at it in detail from the Library of Congress, I went in as close as I could to each of those. I did not see any evidence of there being blood in there. So I didn't add blood where it wasn't, where there wasn't an indication that it was there. These things that they're adding here, I think were just added for a dramatic license. And in a lot of ways, it does make it more dramatic, but I'm trying to make them more realistic. So I just did them where I see them, not where necessarily that it was possible to be adding them like they are in here. This is McDowell's bodyguard. This is actually his camp in here, and basically his area in here for this. And again, you see a lot of them in here that it was like, okay, just a bunch of green and a little bit of red and a couple of browns for the house and the wagons in there, and then a little bit of sky, and that's it. So they didn't do a lot with the color in there for those. This is one of the ones that I did, obviously, in here for this. And what I like about this one, when we're looking at the hand-colored ones, is they actually put in a lot more color. So I didn't put in as vibrant of colors as they did on some of these, but they did try to be able to do those to be able to give some impact in there. And so we're seeing those added in there for those in here for these. This is Hooker's headquarters in Antietam. In here, I believe this is also McClellan's headquarters, if I remember right. From there, I was there a number of years ago, and I believe it says Hooker's headquarters, and I'm using the captions that were on the Library of Congress, and those were actually the original ones that they had from the period on there whenever possible. But I believe this one was actually McClellan's headquarters as well as Hooker's. This is one of the ones that I think is actually probably most interesting, give you an idea of the contrast between the ones from what I did versus the ones from the period. So this is Alan Pinkerton This is Alan Pinkerton here, along with a number of members of the Secret Service. Now, Alan Pinkerton obviously was very well known at the time, was a celebrity in that regards. And you think if you were going to do an image of him and you were doing it for a commercial value, you would actually spend a lot of time and be able to put in a lot of good detail on it. This is what the period image looked like. Just a complete washout, a complete disaster, in my opinion. It's just horrible that you can see almost no details. Everything's almost completely gone. There's almost nothing that you can see from there. What's interesting in this particular one is not only was this one done commercially and provided for sale, but this one actually now belongs in the Library of Congress and was originally part of the collection and owned by Alan Pinkerton. So this is Alan Pinkerton's personal one that he received from the company that produced it. And you think if you were making one of these and you made it for Alan Pinkerton, you'd do a little better job than that. But that's what they gave him. So that's what they had there for that. This is another one from the battlefield. This is another one from Antietam here. And let's actually take a look at the period one from that. So you're seeing the same image. I do like what they did. I like what they did with the sky. I like what they did overall for this. And you're seeing the same type of thing in here, that you're seeing ones where the Confederates are more in Union type of uniforms in there. It looks it has that type of look for it to it. This is one for Burnside's bridge in Antietam there. And you see some people up on the bridge overpass there. You see some of the damage in there. If you go there today, it looks very much like that today, so it's very similar to that at the moment. This is Middlebridge. So Middlebridge actually looks very much like the Burnside Bridge, if you've ever been there. Middlebridge no longer exists, so it was actually destroyed in a flood a number of years ago in there, but this is actually one from the period in there. What's also interesting about this is that when you go to be able to look at this and the hand-colored one, this is the only example that I have that two different people did a hand-colored version. So this is one hand-colored version of it, and then this is the same image with another person's interpretation of that. Is there things that are right or wrong about those? Oh, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously, they had access to the source material. They had some things that I didn't have access to. On the other hand, that I had some tools available to me that they don't have in there. I'm going to go ahead and just mute everybody again. Again, I'm going to try to keep everybody on mute, so nothing personal. If I do mute you in there, I'm just trying to be able to keep it so that it's less distracting. I will open up the audio when we get to the end, so you're certainly welcome to be able to do this. If you've ever been to the battlefield in Antietam, where this is if you go to the visitor center, right outside the visitor center, that you'll see Dunkard Church in there, and then there is a display of artillery, and then this is here. So it's literally steps away from from where the visitor center is today. I mean, literally 10-15 feet from the front door is where this particular image is taken in there. Here's another one from Antietam, and again, one of those ones showing the period images versus what it is that I had. So this is one that I did. And then this is the same image as the period image. And you'll see another one of those where they decided to add elements of blood. In this case, that they didn't put a whole lot, they did almost nothing for the soldiers. They did nothing for the wood. They added a little bit of grass, a little bit of blood, and that was about it. So that's their entire colorization. And like I said, some of them are more interesting and impressive than others in there. This spot on Miller Farm in there, this location actually exists today. I didn't bring a picture, or I don't have a picture showing it, but I did actually go to this particular spot again where it is, and today that there's actually a monument on this particular site, so you can go there and visit it. It's maybe a quarter mile from the visitor center if you're there these days in there for that. This one is actually one that I'm kind of proud of. This is one of Robert E. Lee's headquarters. Robert E. Lee's headquarters exists today in there, and that you can actually see it with all of the stones on here. I actually did this one. It was one of the early ones that I did. And I actually had gone to the battlefield and I had taken a photograph of um, the side of this particular building. And then I went in and colorized each of those stones because they're in still exactly the same place, obviously. I colorized each one of those. What I didn't realize at the time was that the building had actually been burned and was destroyed in the late to 19th century, and that I actually they had it now as a gift shop, and then you could go and you could visit it. There was a little museum in there. It was actually quite good, but it wasn't Lee's headquarters. It wasn't Lee's headquarters anymore, and so that a lot of people were thinking that this had actually been rebuilt with stones from the original. They didn't realize that they were actually all exactly in the same position. I actually shared this several years ago for the Center for Civil War Photography at a presentation that I was doing. And a number of people that were there were actually part of a team that was actually looking to be able to purchase the property to be able to restore it. And they did not realize that all of the stones were actually the originals. So they actually went and confirmed it, that they were based on what it is that I had, and they matched all those stones, and they were able to say, yep, it's exactly the same. And so that they actually used this cover or this image for a cover for a book to be able to help for the purchase of the property. And today it's completely restored as it was and is now again part of the National Park Service. It's no longer a gift shop. It's no longer a little private museum in there. And then this is what the period version of that looked like. So you're seeing it here. And the color for the stones in there, they did a fairly nice job in here that they did a different version of the same house from a slightly different angle. And in here, you see that they made it look almost like brick in here. So it's the same location in here, the same side of the house, but now that they just colored it whatever way was convenient in there. So you see that type of thing. This is Meade's headquarters in Gettysburg there. Dead on the battlefield, more dead on the battlefield. And again, these are ones in here. These are Confederates in here, and you'll see them. So it appears that they're wearing Union uniforms. Very common thing for them to be able to do for that type of thing in here. Again, more ones with Confederate dead in there for that. This is Trossel's farm, if you've been there for that. These are actually horses, dead horses in the front there. Why you would want to hand colorize an image like that, I don't know. The image does exist within the Library of Congress, not one that I personally chose to be able to do, but I'm just sharing it. This is probably the most obvious of one where it is a Confederate soldier that they made it appear to be able to look like a Union soldier. Now, why would they do that? Well, to be honest, it looked a lot more colorful to be able to have a blue uniform than it did to be able to have a gray uniform, and that they would rarely take pictures of the Union soldiers, but they didn't have very many opportunities to take pictures of the Confederate soldiers. So they'd take pictures of Confederate soldiers, but then when they were colorizing them, they would colorize them like they would with Union soldiers. So it was a little bit of an oddity in the way that they did it. So we're actually jumping forward from 1863 over to 1864. This is the area for the Bermuda 100, or the Bermuda 100. And here is the hand-colored one in here. They did a nice job with just putting in some things in here. I wasn't seeing any real indication that there was grass in here, so I tried to be able to do it as faithfully as I could to be able to indicate where there was or was not grass when I saw that. This is one that I like personally because it's not showing anybody of any particular stature, so it's not, Grant or Sherman or anybody, but just a nice image of that. And then the hand-colored version of that same image as well. And again, they put a lot of green in here just to be able to help decorate it up, but I didn't see any indication there was actually any grass in there for those, for that. So here's another one of Sherman in here for this. This is one of those ones, I don't know if anybody watched the Grant that was on last night, tonight, and tomorrow. In there. There were some hand-colored images. I wasn't participating in any of those. I wasn't aware of that particular show, so I was not involved. But I did notice, and I don't know if they're going to do it again tonight, but some of the ones that they had they had mistakes in here, like they're showing in here. So you notice in here with Sherman, you notice that the stars of his uniform, you see it on both sides, they're actually painted in gold. They should be in here in white, like it's showing in here. And I did notice that on one of the images that was showing on the episode of Grant from last night, and it was an image of Grant, not Sherman. But whoever did the colorization colored it and colored the stars, so they did it wrong. It's unfortunate that I wasn't asked to participate. I would have been happy to have helped them out and to be able to help correct that. But it's like you got to appreciate the time and effort that people put into those things. So here is John Bell Hood's headquarters in Atlanta. In here, obviously after the capture, because you're seeing it with Union flags in there for that. Confederate forts in Atlanta in there. And then the same image done with a period one. I like what they did in here for this to be able to help decorate it in here. But again, they didn't put a lot of effort in. The cannon should have been green on the sides for artillery green, and you're not seeing a lot of that. They would take shortcuts for those type of things. Ponder House, also part of the Atlanta campaign in here for this. Well-known image in here. Let's actually take a look at the hand-colored version of that. So there's the same image again. Nicely done in this particular case, but again, I didn't see any indication of grass in there, so I didn't include it if I didn't see it. This is the railroad depot. This is actually before the burning of Atlanta, so you're seeing there as it was. There are images of the same area afterwards. I didn't have any of those from the colorized set, and I haven't done any colorized ones, but there are a number of them available on the Library of Congress from that. This one is actually kind of interesting. This is one that I did in here. You see the wagons in here, blue, and then it's a little hard to see, but the spokes of the wagons are in red. That was what the Supply Corps colors were. So blue wagons with red wheels in there, and that was actually the standard in there for those. So all of these would have been blue wagons, blue wagons, blue wagons in there. And then if we look at the hand-colored version in there, that they just thought it was easier to be able to just make them brown or just to be able to leave them free. So they didn't colorize them as they could have or should have been at the time period for that. So I do try to be able to do a lot of research. I do a lot of research online. I actually work with a lot of historians. I work with a lot of museums to be able to get the colorizations right. So I do have a reason for every one of the colors that I choose in there. Oftentimes with civilian clothes, I won't be able to tell what the color should have been, but I try to use period cloth or clothing in there to be able to do my samples from. Just another one in here. This is Fort Brady in there. This is one in here, and you see a monitor in here. This is actually a double-turreted monitor, so it's kind of interesting in here. If you look in the background, most of the monitors that you see that they had just a single turret in there, but this is a double-turreted one, so it actually had two guns on there, so a little bit of something different in there for that. This is actually one that I just did yesterday. I've actually liked this image, and I had the hand-colored version in my set for a while, and then I thought, I should actually just go and find this image. So I went and found it on the Library of Congress, and then I put this one together. Again, I have no idea what this is. Jesse Grant in here, and obviously, and Mrs. Grant, what their colors of their clothes were. But here is the hand-colored one, and you see some differences there. So they chose to be able to put him into a blue. I did try it in blue. It just didn't look quite that good when I was playing with it. And I wanted to be able to do red on the leather for the chair in there. So I didn't want to be able to match it. I thought it was too much if I tried to match it for Gloria's dress in there. So I just left that one alone for that. This is Grant's horse, Cincinnati. So he actually had a couple of different horses, and that he actually would send them out to get photographs sometimes. If he didn't have time to be able to pose for a photograph himself, he'd send the horses out to get photographed. And so here is the hand-colored version of the same one. I like this one. This is one that is really well done, in my opinion, in there for that, for the period timepieces in there for that. Here's a view along Dutch Gap. If you're not familiar, Dutch Gap was created to be able to get around some Confederate fortifications. When they did that, They spent all of this time to be able to get around the fortifications, and then by the time that they really were completing it, that the war was pretty much over. The shortcut that they made by building this canal and gap in there, though, is actually still in use today. So while it was something that was rushed through during the war, it is actually something that that they still take advantage of today. So here's another view along the gap in here, and another view of the same thing. You can find it interesting what it is that they thought was important enough to be able to hand color. So we're seeing a lot of that type of thing in here. Some army wagons at City Point. City Point was where the Grant that we saw earlier with his family, that's where that was. It was at City Point in there for that. Resting atop some fortifications and the hand-colored version of the same image in there for that. Again, more images of Confederate dead. This is one that I did. Notice in here, I did put a small amount of blood on the forehead, but not greatly to the extent that they tried to do it. And this is another one, if you notice on here, this is a Confederate soldier in here, obviously in Confederate uniform in there. And then when we're seeing it in here, that they made it appear to be a Union uniform. In why they would do that, you know, it's like, I don't think it really helped, but it's what they chose to do. This one is at Fort Sumter. If you notice the date, April 14th, 1865, this was the date that they raised the flag at Fort Sumter. It was when they had General Anderson come in to be able to participate in the ceremony. They had actually invited Lincoln to be able to come down. Lincoln said he was busy. He had a play to go to that night, and he wouldn't be able to attend. I'm thinking maybe he probably should have gone, but you know, we'll never know what would have been there. There's another view outside of Fort Sumter at the same time period in there. Let's actually take a look at the original. So there's the original for that that they did a nice job, in my opinion, to be able to do this. You can go and you can visit this today. A lot of the rocks and things are there. Obviously, all of the other materials are gone. They've cleaned that up in there, but you know, certainly the rocks and things are there. Why you would do a hand-colored version of a damaged house, I don't know, but they did, so I tried to be able to match and recreate that one in there for that. So there's the period one for that. This is actually one of my favorites for a couple of reasons. I actually spent 7.5 years in the Navy, so I can appreciate other sailors and what it is that they were going through. I also find it interesting just from the standpoint that this is one of those ones that I did the colorization. We're seeing a hand colorization in here, and now we're stepping back into what it is that we would typically see. So that here is the hand colored version of that, and then there is the same image with a period print that you would see in black and white from the same one. So that's typically the kind of things that you would see in there for that. Now oops, let me just do that again. Let me try that one more time. There we go. Let these scroll through. These are the people that provided the original images that I actually was using on there. So I did want to at least acknowledge those individuals because the images came from a number of different sources. So I wanted to be able to acknowledge all of the ones that had provided images over the time. Now with that, I do want to just share a couple of handfuls that I don't have hand-colored ones, but these are ones that I've added since then that I really actually just liked individually, and they're just random images in here. So this is a view of the artillery, the captured artillery at the rockets in Virginia. This is one that I actually personally really kind of like. Just a family life in Fort Slocum, which is outside of Washington, D.C., and they would actually bring their family in there. You see a small child and wife and kids in there for that. Not uncommon. They would actually have them there, and then when they went off to war, obviously the family would stay behind, but when they were in camp, oftentimes they were able to bring their family in. Here's one of Sherman in Atlanta at Fort number 7. A favorite of mine as well of firing a Quaker gun in here. So It was actually just a a log in there, but I just like it's just amusing. I found it quite humorous in there for that. There's another one of Sherman's men in a captured fort. One of Lincoln with Pinkerton and McClelland. Lincoln's funeral car in 1865. The 13-inch mortar, the Dictator. This is outside of Petersburg. I have another one of this one also that was actually done as on the back of a railroad car, but this is when it was mounted in there. This one is actually a personal favorite. I brought this one up in here because when you go to the Library of Congress and looking at the images, they'll list the caption in there, and they list the caption as it was listed on the card of the record when it was donated to them. Some of those they didn't have a description, or the description that was written was incorrect. This one is the galley gun in Fort McAllister in Georgia. You can go to Fort McAllister today and you can visit this particular area in there, and that John B. Galley was the commander of the fort. He was actually killed in there, and then they named this gun for him, and it was a Confederate gun that was firing back at the Union positions. This is right along the river there, so they were firing right back into the river for the Union boats that would come up. The reason that I included this one in here is because that when you go out to the Library of Congress, that it actually will give the description for that. The description for this one was actually listing this one as Swamp Angel, which I knew was not true. And so I did quite a bit of research in there. And then I actually ended up getting Jack Melton, who is the owner of Artilleryman magazine and for the historical publications in there. He is also the owner and the editor for Civil War News, which my wife writes for in there. I got his assistance, and Tally Kirkland, who is he is one of the guides at McAllister, and we were able to identify that with some other supporting images that the Library of Congress already had, and we got them to be able to change it. So I've had them change several images with the captions in there based on the proof that we were provided. So I was very proud to be able to accomplish that. And then final one in here is one of my wife's favorite in here, Captain Gibson's flying artillery. So this is just one that she just loves. If you notice this image though, there's actually 4 artillery pieces in here. So you're seeing 1, 2, 3, and 4 different artillery pieces. There is one of them in here that is in brass. I did actually go to Jack Melton, who is an expert in Civil War artillery, and I showed him close-ups of all of these guns to be able to confirm what the colorization for each of those should have been. And so this one is actually a brass piece. All the other are iron in here, so that's why you do see that difference in here for that. So that is what I had to share with you tonight. I wanted to say thank you for just spending some time doing this. Let's actually take a look at the comments and questions that we have in here. I'll respond to those. Actually, let me go back, put something back up there. We'll at least put an image back up there while I take a look through those. And then I'll open up the audio here as well if you have questions or comments in there from that. So let's see in here, what questions do we have? Are you digitizing the negative? So what I did was that I actually got these from the Library of Congress. So I actually did not scan any of these originally. These are available from the Library of Congress in there. And so you can actually go to the Library of Congress, and that's actually what it was that I was looking at here. This is on the Library of Congress. There, you can actually download the negatives. So I'll actually post this into the chat area if anybody is interested. That's where you can find the ones from the Library of Congress. There's also the Brady Handy collection. These are the ones that were part of Matthew Brady and his collection. Handy is the individual that that donated it, so that's why it says Brady Handy there for that. So I posted those 2 in there for that. So that's actually where those came from. So I actually got the scans from the Library of Congress, downloaded those from there, and then I did my colorizations on top of that. Janet is asking, how did you get started in colorizing historic photos? Well, it's actually kind of interesting. In 2008, my wife gave me a book on Photoshop, and that it had, it's about 400 pages long, and it had 2 pages on colorization in there. And so I took those 2 pages and I started playing with that, and I thought, oh, what's the oldest image? So I got old family photos and that type of thing, and I started trying to colorize those. And I thought, what's the oldest photo that I could find? So I went looking for ones from the Library of Congress, and then I discovered that I looked for ones from the Civil War, and I discovered that the Library of Congress had the original negatives, and they'd actually posted them online. And so within about 6 months that I started hand coloring those, and then I opened up a website and started sharing them with people, and people got interested in them, and I started offering them commercially, and basically that's where it went from that. So that's how I got interested in doing that. Like, I've always been interested in history. I've always been interested in this period of time. I actually have 3 ancestors that fought in the Civil War, so personally I have a great interest in it. From that, I've lived near some of the battlefields, so I'm interested in it from that perspective. But this actually just got me an opportunity to be able to get me more personally. I actually feel like when I'm doing these images that I'm actually spending a little bit of time with these individuals, even though that they passed away over a century ago, that it gives me an opportunity to just spend a few more minutes with each one of them. Does the Library of Congress let you borrow the glass negatives? Absolutely not. They do not do that. You can make appointments and reservations to be able to go and view them, but you're not touching them and you're not handling them. I've actually never handled them personally, so I just use the online ones. Soldier in the Pinkerton photo holding the tent pole is actually the first female detective. Interesting. I was not aware of that. So thank you, Janet, for sharing that. Her name was Kate Warren in there. So I have to go and take a look at if what the Library of Congress has commenting on that. If you have information supporting that in there, that we could actually go and see if there's anything from that we may be able to get them to be able to update. I have a few contacts there now from having done this a few times, but we may be able to get them to update their listing in there for that. So let me just go. I'm going to just pull that listing up here real quick and see if it lists who those are. It does indicate this is the listing for that one. It indicates the individuals in there, so we may need to be able to go through and just to be able to clarify that and see if that's the same one. So if we have any evidence or supporting things that we can provide the Library of Congress, we may be able to see some of that. Similar to the colorized fashion plates in Godey's, are no 2 colorized tin types the same. It's the subject to the artist's interpretation. Yeah, absolutely, completely up to them on what it is they wanted to be able to do. So that there's a lot of variety on there. Like I said, I see the ones that were done for personals a lot more, a lot better than the ones that are there for the public ones in there for that. The hand-colored ones that were privately done, I think, were the best in my opinion. Can people purchase your colorized image on your site? Well, thank you for that in there. So let's actually do this. I'm going to go here and I'll just put the link in there for that. I wasn't trying to be able to make this, but since there was a question about this, I wasn't trying to be able to make this an advertisement for my site, but I'll go ahead and put a link in here for that. So I'll put a link into the chat. That's the area on my site where you can actually pick that up. And if you want to be able to go and take a look at the work that I did in there, it actually has all of my images plus ones. I do ones outside of the Civil War as well, so just be aware I do have more of those in there. There is a discount if you are a member of the Pasadena Civil War Roundtable. There is a discount code that was included in there for the newsletter. I'm not going to share it here to be able to get people to encourage them to be able to join in there for that. The Swamp Angel is now in a park in Trenton. That's correct. It is actually, I do actually have an image of the Swamp Angel as it looked when it was, after it was damaged in there. The Swamp Angel was broken. It was destroyed in there for that. The image that I had was not the Swamp Angel. It was misidentified as the Swamp Angel. It was actually the Galley gun in there for that. Have an originator stereo view of their artillery in it. Can I get it colorized? Absolutely, I'd be happy to be able to talk to you about that. I do private colorizations for those. You get my contact information in there. Actually, from my website there, you can that I posted. There's a contact link information, and you can contact me directly from there for that. So let's see. We had a business unit that was sold frame prints of these images a while back, and they worked with Polaroid 3 years ago. Oh, interesting in there for that. I'm going to go ahead and open the audio here for everybody. If anybody has comments in there that they would like to be able to do, you can just go ahead and just unmute yourself locally if you're still muted. If you have a question that you would like to be able to ask, I'll be happy to answer them. If there's anything else that I can help with, just let me know in here as well. And of course, you can publish post out to the chat window as well if you have a question that you'd prefer to be able to do that rather than just posting it in here. No questions, or everybody got their questions answered here?
How long did you do the photo?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on how long, how detailed it is. So if you look at an image like this image took me several days. This is probably 3 or 4 days worth of work in there to be able to do that. You see an image where that, like with Grant with his son and his wife at City Point. That one I did yesterday. I did it in the afternoon. So it depends on the complexity, really, the amount of detail in there. So it really depends on what it is that's going on with that.
How did you pick the color for the uniforms? The trousers seem like a really pale, bright blue, a sharp blue. Is that what they were really like?
Yeah, actually, I'll give you a better example in there. Let me go in for. This is actually probably a better example of what the pants would have looked like in there for that. I've adjusted those periodically over the years when I've started working with more historians in there for that, and those should probably be adjusted a bit in there for that. This one is probably pretty close to being accurate. It was not as bright of a blue. I did see ones that they would have those. I'm trying to see if I have any in the examples that I have here for that. But I would see examples of one where they were made to those specifications, and they would be brighter or darker depending on what it was, and you'd see a lot of variety of things. Also, it was one of those things that you would see images from the South, for example. I'll just move this over. That the Confederate uniforms were in all different colors. You would see a gray, you would see a blue, you would see more of a brown in there. So there was just huge variety of colors for those type of things in there. And the same thing, obviously, with if we go over into the Union side, with the Union uniforms as well, there was just a great variety of the uniforms that we saw on here. So that this one is probably very, very close to what the images or the uniform would have looked like. And then I see some of them in there that were quite a bit brighter than what they would have been. So it varies in there depending on which ones that we're looking at.
Thank you.
What other questions in here?
Just a side note, John Hunt Morgan, the cavalry officer for the South, wore a captured Union general uniform with pride, the symbol of conquest.
It's interesting what happens on some of those type of things in there. I mean, you look at like Brownell in here. Brownell was a Union soldier at the beginning of the war. He actually stayed in the Union for the entire period. He ended up becoming a lieutenant by the end of the war. But this uniform here, it actually still exists. It's actually at the battlefield at Manassas, if you go there. But you would swear it was a Confederate uniform, but it was actually a Union uniform in there. So it's actually you know, you think of them as being a Union blue and Confederate gray, but the variety of the uniforms was actually much greater than that. It was really quite a bit, quite interesting.
I just like to compliment you on your work. I think you really bring this to life.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do see another comment in there from Craig. The jackets were darker blue due to the fact that they were often removed. Their jackets, their pants would fade in direct sunlight. That is true. That would happen in there. They were wool uniforms for that, and you would see variety for that. You also see when you're actually working with the original images and the negatives, when you're working in the black and white portions, you would see them in darker or lighter in there. So I use the same color to be able to colorize them. And then for the ones that they were lighter, you would see them. So for example, if you notice these two, I actually used the same color blue on here that I did for these two, but it just turned out a lot darker on here because this was a cleaner, probably a new uniform, and this one was one that had actually been more in use. So you see the differences between those, even though I was actually using the same color in between those two. Any other comments, questions that we have in here?
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to personally thank Dave for doing this. Dave is not only our speaker this month, but he's the person that's making these virtual meetings possible. And so we have to thank him on two accounts for being a huge supporter of our roundtable. And if you have any questions or concerns or feedback on these programs, feel free to drop us a line at our Pasadena Civil War Roundtable website. It's pasadenacwrt.org, and the link for the contact is on there. And we'd be love to be able to respond to you and hear your feedback on these. Dave, do you have anything more?
I didn't have it.
Nice,
I will
nice
post.
Picture of our website.
Yeah, I will post the link to the website on here, just that everybody has it in the chat area, so that if you do have any questions, I'll just stay around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining and participating this evening. I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to share the image and the work that I did. I did those because it's something that I have a personal interest in, but I do really appreciate that others share and appreciate the work and the effort that it takes to be able to do this. So thank you very much. I do appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, David.
Thank you. I'll just stay on here for another 2 minutes or so if anybody has any last minute questions that they want to ask. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and close it out. I just want to give anybody that didn't have the opportunity to ask a question or anything.
Hi, excuse me. Hello, yes. I don't have a question. Those images were stunning. I just want to thank you for your work and for doing that.
I appreciate
that.
Yeah,
I worked in schools for many years, and I wish there was a way to get those images into the textbooks. You know, I think it would reach the children more than the images that we presented to them, and seeing the actual images somehow. I mean, I can't imagine those kids would ever grow up to, you know, vote for a war after seeing images like that. So thank you.
You know,
It's really
it's interesting that you say that. I was always interested in the Civil War from the images and things that I had seen, and I grew up in a military family, so we moved around quite a bit. And my wife's nephew, when I started doing these, I'd been doing them for about a year, and that he we brought a bunch of the images and said, "Oh, would you be interested in looking at them?" And he was like, "Oh, where are you? We did the Civil War last year." You know, it's like I don't need to.
Oh, please. You know, yeah. Like, oh my gosh. Well, first off, you've got an incredible learning curve, and a really, I would say, good artistic sense. and obviously a great wife too. So, but anyway,
She's
no,
upstairs
no.
watching, so you know,
Oh,
I
good.
thank you for that.
Good. But no, that was my experience working in schools. I fell in love with the Civil War because well, I was in a 7th grade classroom, and the guy who was teaching it was a military man. He'd been on the Nimitz, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, great military man, and he taught history. And on that spring break of that year, you know, I went to Gettysburg, you know, just but yeah, I came to it late in life. But the children in that classroom, it just didn't get them somehow, and I so regret that.
Well,
I
what I
so
was going
regret
to say
that.
was that that we had those images, and that he said, "Oh, you know," I said, "I'm not really interested in looking at it because we already did the Civil War." And so my wife's sister, that she's like, "Oh, you should look at him. You should look." So that and we'd brought albums of them. So he started looking at them, and he spent a couple of hours going through them. Once he started looking at them, he got really interested because if you look at the images on our site, that it will actually go through, and then it will tell you the story and the history behind the image. So it's not just the image, but it actually tells you the story of who that individual was, or you know what their role during the Civil War was, so that you learn something about them. And the reason I'm posting these up here is that
That's wonderful.
somebody did post on here. May I see a picture of the woman that was discussed earlier? I'm not sure specifically which woman. So, and I don't think that it was specifically from this page. I did do one earlier of Grant's wife on there, Gloria Dent. So it may be her that you were thinking of, and I can bring her up again. So I'll share that one again in here, but I'm not sure specifically. Other than that, specifically which woman was being mentioned in there from whoever asked that. So I apologize about that. So this is my version of her. That may have been the one in for that. The other one not in there. So I don't know. Any other comments or questions, feedbacks that I can help with here? Not Grant's wife. It was one that I shared though. Let me see.
It might have been the one that Janet identified as being the female spy.
Oh, right. I know which one we're talking about. So that one, let me just do it this way. Let me get to the right one. There we go. So she's saying it's here. It's this one. And so what Janet said, Janet, are you still here or did you leave?
It's the one by the pole.
So this one?
Yes.
Saying that was her. So let's actually see what the Library of Congress says and see if we can get that corrected. So the Library of Congress for this particular image in there says, standing George H. Bangs, John Babcock, and Augustus Littlefield. And she had identified that as being, she gave a name in there for that.
Yeah, see, they named 3 people, but there's 4 standing. Because there's one inside the tent standing.
Talking about this one in the back?
Right. There are 4 people standing, and they only named 3.
Oh, they named the 3. So you're saying it's not, I was thinking you meant this one. So you're talking about the one in the background. You can't really see them very well.
No, Janet was saying that the one by the tent pole is the female spy. And that they may have named the one in the tent instead of her.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I had not heard that before. It's interesting what you find out about these things when you start digging into some of this in there. I mean, one of my favorites in here is the one of, if I can find him in here. Let me go back over here. Of Mosby. Mosby, obviously well known as the Gray Ghost. In there, after the war, he actually moved out to California, and he actually lived in Pasadena and was a friend of the Pattons family, and was actually a mentor to George Patton in the late 1890s in there for that. So, where the Pattons family had their home is actually now on the grounds of the Huntington Library. So it's kind of interesting that that area was connected even prior to the Huntingtons being involved with it, and their involvement with obviously with the Civil War today, that it was actually involved with the Civil War previously as well. Anything else? So if there are no other comments, I'll go ahead and close it out. I do want to thank everybody just for spending a few minutes with us. I did record this too, by the way, so I'll be posting it out to onto YouTube later. It should be up hopefully in the next day or two.
Great.
I'll provide the link to Janet for that if you'd like to be able to have a copy of that, or to be able to review it in there. If anybody does have any personal questions or anything, you just feel free to reach out to me on my website. I'll be happy to answer them. You know, it's like I get people contacting me every day about questions about images, what you know that I know about it, if I can help on things, and always happy to be able to talk with somebody that's interested in the Civil War. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and
Thank
have
you.
a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Thanks.